Hello, welcome to episode 2 of Field Notes from a Christian Case Manager. My name is Stephen Cook, and today I have a very interesting story that I would like to share. But before I get into that story, I would like to take a moment and talk about the right of self-determination. The right of self-determination. This is something that is a federally protected right. It has been argued all the way to the Supreme Court and supported, rightfully so. Defended. And the right of self-determination basically means that if a person is of sound mind and they are not engaging in any illegal activity, that they have the right to live as they please. They have the right to make choices with regard to their own health, what services they accept or reject. They have the right to live in squalor. They have the right to die in their home if they want to. Now, they may make choices that I personally would not make and that I would not approve of, but that's not the point. The point is that they have the right of self-determination, and they have the right to live and die in their home and to accept or refuse services if they want to. Now, this is something that I think finds biblical basis with. I think one can argue this from Genesis 1, where we are made in the image of God. Genesis 1, 26 and 27, where God says, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." And the word image there translates the Hebrew word tselem. And it means that we basically are made in the image of God in the sense that we are finite analogs to God. We function as theomorphs, as image bearers. But being made in the image of God means that we have the ability to reason. We have a sense of morality within us. We have consciousness and self-consciousness. But it also means that we have volition, that we have the right to make choices in life, and that we have a certain amount of freedom to exercise our volition. So I think it is part of what it means to be made in the image of God, and therefore should be respected. Another case for this biblically, defending this biblically, would be in Matthew chapter 10, in the first few verses there, where Jesus sends the apostles out to surrounding cities to proclaim the gospel of the kingdom. And when he sends them out, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, you can read it for yourself, but when he sends them out, he says that they are to go forth with the gospel, and that if the people of a city receive them, that's fine. But if the people of the city refuse them, then they are to shake the dust off their feet and move on to the next city. So the apostles have the right to express their disapproval by shaking the dust off their feet, as it were. But they do not have the right to ram, cram, or jam the information down the throats of other people. You cannot force these things upon other people. Other people's right of self-determination must be respected. And if people don't want what you have to offer, you do not have the right to force it upon them. And so I think that the right of self-determination is something that is argued biblically and is a federally protected right, and again, something that I totally agree with. Now, as an example of how this plays out, I had a client a number of years ago, and this client was in her mid-70s, and she was living in an apartment complex, and she was approaching end of life. She was losing a lot of weight. In fact, she was about 78 pounds at the time of her passing. The client had no social support. She had a daughter that lived a few miles away. When I called the daughter to inquire about, possible services for mom, the daughter told me, basically the daughter said, "Don't call me unless she's dead." Now, that shocked me. I didn't expect to hear that. And then the daughter hung up, and that ended the conversation. I didn't call back. And I don't know what the backstory is on that, so can't really speak to that issue. Maybe there's some past issues there that the daughter has some unresolved unforgiveness with, I don't know. So I suspend judgment on those issues. I'm not here to be the judge in that matter. I just knew that was a closed door. So I go into the client's home, and over a period of several months, the client continues to decline. Now, I'm coming in and I'm providing services and resources to her directly through the agency that I work with. And I tried to connect her with other services through the state of Texas, tried to get her help with utilities, help with an in-home caregiver attendant. There were resources and services available to her, but every time I offered those services or resources, she told me no. She would say no to that service, no to that service, no to that service, but she would accept what I had to offer, which is fine. And you pick your battles. You take what you can get. Now, I'm biased. I've got an agenda. I care about her, and I want the best for her, and I want to improve the quality of her life. So I come with an agenda, and I'm very open about that. And I told her flat out, I said, look, I said, you're telling me no today. But guess what? When I come back in a month, guess what I'm going to bring up? I'm going to talk about this again because I want you to get these services. And I know you're telling me no now, but I hope you'll change your mind next time I come back out. And over the years, I've had this experience where I've realized that a no today may be a yes tomorrow and vice versa. And when I'm dealing with clients who are refusing services, I'm not neutral. I've come with an agenda. I want to assert myself, but I want to do so in a very diplomatic way. I want to do so in the most diplomatic way that I can. I think it was Sir Isaac Newton who made the comment that diplomacy is the art of making points without making enemies. It's the art of making points without making enemies, and I think there's merit to that. And so I come with an agenda, and I want to provide these services, but I have to be careful about how I approach her and the timing of the approach. Now, I didn't like the fact that she was refusing the services that I had to offer, but I always had to respect her right of self-determination. Where it got to be challenging was this client began to experience incontinence issues. And her bed was about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 feet from the bathroom. And the client would on occasion get up out of bed, and she was so frail, it took her a few minutes just to get to the bathroom. But sometimes she couldn't make it, and she would wind up defecating on the floor. And then she would just turn around and just crawl back into bed because she was so fatigued. She was so weak and so frail. And some of my staff that were coming in would come in, and they go into a home where the trash hasn't been taken out. There's fruit flies around the apartment. There's the smell. They go in, they go through the home. It was a very unclean situation, very unsanitary. They go in, in order to get to her, they're having to step over landmines to get her. They're seeing things, they're smelling things. The smell gets stuck in the fabric of your clothing, and you can't unsee it. And here's this woman who's, just under 80 pounds. She's in an emaciated condition. Again, she doesn't have much longer to live. And it's really a difficult thing to see. And this one particular staff member kept coming back to me, and he's like, well, why aren't we providing services? Why aren't we getting her this? Why aren't we getting her that? And confidentiality hinders my ability to be able to share information. And I assured him, I said, look, I'm doing everything I can to get her services, to try to help her and to improve the quality of her life, but we cannot force these services upon her. And he didn't like what he was hearing, and so I keep sending him out. And over a period of a few months and conversations with him, he finally just says, look, I can't go back into the home. I can't go back in there. It's too much for me to see. And he was only going out one day a week and providing services to her, but it was too much for him. And he told me, he said, look, I can't get it out of my head. And, here's the thing is we all have sensitivity levels, and some things that we see, that we hear, that we experience touches us very quickly, and it touches us very deeply. And sometimes we can't unseat that very easily. Over time, you learn coping skills. I learned coping skills, and I learned how to frame things, and I learned how to manage my thoughts. And so at the end of the day, I have to leave the day knowing I did everything I could, but I have to leave the day going home to my wife to be the best husband that I can be. And so if I go home and I'm constantly ruminating about work and things that are going on at work, well, that's no good. And I don't need that spilling over into my married life, into my personal life, into other areas. I have to isolate that in many ways. Now, sometimes you can't, and sometimes that's not always easy to do. But again, with this particular staff member that I had, he was going into the home, and what he was seeing, it was hitting him very, very hard. And we talked about it on the phone for about 10 minutes one day. And he said, look, I go home and I think about her when I'm at home. I wonder, is she okay? Is she going to be alive tomorrow? Why won't she accept services? And he said, it's affecting my sleep. He said, I go throughout the week and I think about her. I can't get her out of my head. And I said, look, I understand, but if you don't go in on your assigned day, then that's one less day that she's going to get services, and that could exacerbate the situation. Because in those moments, even though I'm feeling for this person, I have to advocate for the client. I have to advocate for the client, because in this situation, she needs services, and even the tiniest little impact can impact her negatively or positively. And so I've got to advocate for the client. So I'm trying to be diplomatic and with him and explain the situation. But at the same time, I feel for this man. I love his heart. He's got a good heart and he cares, maybe a little too much, but he cares. But he says, look, I can't get her out of my head. I can't get the smell. I have to go home and take a shower. And I said, look, I get that. I totally understand where you're coming from. And at the end of the day, he wound up saying, look, I just can't do it. And so I said, okay, so he wound up being reassigned to another client, not quite as difficult a situation. And I wound up getting a substitute to come in. It was actually a retired nurse who had, after 30 years, had seen her fair share of everything under the sun, and she was not put off by it. She was a real godsend. In the sense that she wound up filling that void on that particular day of the week. And with this client, again, she was on for months, and she eventually passed. She wound up not accepting any of the additional services that I had to offer for her. And it was one of those things where it's like, you want to do the best that you can. You want to provide. You're not neutral. You come with skill sets. There's certain tools that you bring with you. There's diplomacy skills, and you just have to be persistent in trying to be the best that you can be and to provide services for the people that you serve in the community. And I cared about this woman. I really wanted her to have a better ending than what she had, and she wound up passing, and it was unfortunate. But at the end of the day, I had to respect her right of self-determination. I had to respect that, because again, that is a federally protected right, and I believe that it is a biblical right within every human being. And so it was one of those things that I had to deal with as a client. Now, let me share another story that kind of dovetails with that, and this is on a very personal level. And this has to do with my mom. I cared for my mom the last 6 years of her life. And she, the last 18 months, she had dementia. There were days where she didn't even know who I was. And that became its own issue. And I had to assume responsibility for her financially, medically, handling all of her bills, getting somebody to come in and clean her home. And that was, by the end, it was a very, very difficult thing. But the first couple years that I was helping to care for my mom, and she was about 80 years of age at the time, there was a situation where her brother was living in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and he had passed away. And I had gone out there with my mom to help her close out his estate. He didn't have much, but to close out his estate. And by the time we got everything closed out, it took several months to do. It was a lot of paperwork to work through, a lot of accounts to close and death certificates, and managing the closing of an estate is a very, very difficult thing, and I'd never done it before, so it was a learning curve for me. But at the end of it all, my mom wound up being the benefactor, the beneficiary of his estate per his will, a portion of his will anyway, portion of the estate. And she wound up getting about $50,000. I think it was just over $50,000. Now, once all that money was settled into her account, my wife and I had a discussion as to how quickly she would be broke. And my wife thought it would take several months, and I thought it would take about 30 days before she would burn through all that money. And I was right. Within 30 days, my mom was broke. She had gambled away $20,000, and she had given away the rest to family and grandkids and grandnieces and nephews who just spontaneously came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden had great love for her, and also had needs, things that they need. And of course, Grandma was, there to, dole out the dough. And my mom, growing up, I love my mom. She was a wonderful woman. She gave great hugs, made wonderful food. House always smelled like cookies and pies and cakes. And she kept a super clean house. There was no shortage of love from my mom. But she had her flaws. I mean, like we all do. Welcome to the human race, right? But she had her flaws, and two of the flaws that my mom had over the years was men and money. Her picker was broken when it came to men. She seemed to almost always pick the wrong guy. And the other problem she had was with money. My mom had zero concept of financial responsibility. And I come from a relatively poor family of 8. There would have been 10, but twins died at birth. But we grew up poor. We had love in the home. We had music. We had education. We had things of value. So we were rich in other areas. We were just poor financially. But my mom did not know how to handle money. And she lived in Vegas for 25 years. And she had a terrible gambling problem. Terrible gambling problem. In fact, there were times as a teenager we didn't even know if we were going to be able to afford rent, or if we were going to be homeless, in a few weeks. So my mom always burned through money, but my mom had no concept of money. So when my mom came into this money, this inheritance, I just kind of knew right off the top of my head she was going to burn through it. Now, it's one thing for me to respect the right of self-determination in a client. That's a client. They're not family. They're not close. I don't have that emotional tie. It's another thing if we're talking about a loved one. It's another thing if we're talking about a parent. And I gave her lots of good advice about investing the money, about putting it away, about using it, letting it stretch out, maybe buying some things that might be nice and useful for her that she could have. And I was pretty persistent, but she refused all of my good advice. And when the grandkids showed up and said, hey, we want this and we want that, and Mom's sending 1,000 here and 1,500 there and 3,000 over there, and I'm saying, Mom, they're taking advantage of you. Don't do this. And I'm doing my best to intervene, and I'm trying. I'm not neutral. And there's a part of me that's just holding back because it's killing me to see her burn through this money like this. But again, it was one of those things where it's like she, at the time, was of sound mind. And she has the right of self-determination. She had the right to give that money away. She had the right to gamble $20,000 of it away over a period of a week or so. I did not approve of her decisions, but she had the right to make those decisions. And so, again, this is one of those things where when we talk about these value systems or these ways of thinking that we bring to our care, that we provide to our clients in the community, it has application not only to the clients, but it has application also to people who may be near and dear to us, people that are close like family, or in my case with my mom. So anyway, that's going to close out today's episode. I hope that this has been helpful to you, and I hope you'll join me again for the next episode. I wish you a blessed day.